What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, June 13th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Apologies, sort of, not really, for the late start today. I am generally going to continue doing this early afternoon, but didn't have a chance to get it done before the Coastal game and didn't want to miss Coastal Arizona game one of the College World Series. So, and then that game lasted way longer than I expected it to. I did not expect a 3.5-hour game, but that's what we got. Coastal won, so really happy about that. Nice to see them go up 1-0. That's the only college sports team that I give a shit about at all is Coastal baseball, Coastal football when they're relevant, but that's not very often. So going to go through game by game. I'll go as quick as I can on this one. Try and save some time because there are 12 games. I do need to make lineups. I am starting later than usual, all of that stuff. So on a 12-game slate, there are going to be plenty of spots that just aren't particularly interesting, aren't particularly relevant. I will probably go through those as quickly as I can. Pulling up a couple other things here before I get started. Forgot to get my pitching sheet up, but going to go through as quick as I can. There are a few weather issues on this slate also. Baltimore potentially has some weather issues. Same with Atlanta. Right now, I think they both look okay. Like if the slate started right now, I would be playing them, but definitely keep an eye on those. Make sure that nothing gets worse. They both look like the really annoying situation that you get where rain probably moves in late enough that it isn't a big deal. But if like a storm pops out ahead of it, then you end up having a problem, and that's difficult to predict. So just make sure that between now and lock, you don't get a forecast update that like, oh, there's storms exploding over the ballpark right now. If that happens, obviously it's a problem, but right now it doesn't look like that'll be the case. So if the slate started right now, I would be assuming that we can go ahead and play guys from those games. So starting it off here, or before I get into it, reminder that I will be using the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. If you want to use those, link is in the description below. These are the projections that we've put together, those of us at Endgame Syndicate. Bought Run the Sims, put together these MLB projections. Utical very heavily involved in the process there, trying to basically take all of the things that go on in his head and put them on paper for other people to use. We've been really happy with them so far. Still improving some stuff. We updated something a week or two ago that has looked really good. We have another update coming soon, but really happy with these so far. I've had success with them. I recommend using them. And if you are somebody that plays lower volume and you want access, but it doesn't make sense for you to pay full price for the fully downloadable, detailed projections, all of that, you don't need all of that. You can get them for $10 a month, just overlaid straight onto your DraftKings lineups page. That should come in handy if you're hand building, making late swaps, all of that stuff. Link is in the description below. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps out quite a bit. Now, getting into it with the Angels, starting or in game one against the Orioles. For Baltimore, we have Charlie Morton. For the Angels, we have Jack Kahanowitz. Neither one of these pitchers look like a priority on a 12-game slate. If I were going to one of them, I would expect to get to Charlie Morton first. He has been solid-ish for the most part after a very, very, very bad start to the season. The Orioles moved him to the bullpen for a little bit. He kind of put things together, has had a couple good starts, struggled in his last one against the A's. But even that one, I think he wasn't good, certainly, but he wasn't quite as bad as the numbers suggest. He faced like 10 batters in the first inning, but the very first hitter of the game hit a routine fly ball to left field that Dylan Carlson looked like a high school like JV player on, and it fell in for what was ruled a double. There was like an infield single in a key spot with a couple guys on base that prolonged that inning. So again, he didn't look good, but it wasn't quite as bad as numbers suggest. He is still only 6,300. Does have a very good strikeout matchup here against the Angels. You know, this is a team with a very high K percentage against right-handed pitching. He's cheap. So he is getting 5% ownership, about an 8% chance of being optimal. So again, not any sort of priority here, but if you do need to pay down for a relatively low-owned guy, Morton is viable. On the other side, I think it's a lot more difficult to make a case for Kahanowitz. He is only 5,500. He's a good ground ball pitcher, but we know that ground balls don't generally result in good fantasy scores unless you happen to just get a bunch of ground balls and go 6 or 7 innings, pick up a win. So you can make the salary case for Kohanowitz, but not a good matchup here against the Orioles. The O's are getting healthier, although it is a relatively weak Orioles lineup tonight. Maverick Handley is in there, so you do get a free out in the 9 spot for Baltimore. Colton Cowser is not in the lineup after slamming into the wall yesterday. He's getting a day off, or at least a partial day off. But you do have Mullins back. You have Laureano back. So this lineup is deeper than it had been for a nice chunk of the season recently. Carlson's been hitting reasonably well. You have Ramon Urias in there instead of Kobe Mayo. So that's, from a what are they right now standpoint, that's a downgrade for Kohanowitz as well. Kobe Mayo, very good prospect, power hitting prospect, but also a lot of strikeout in his game and hasn't put it together at the major league level yet. Urias is an average to above average hitter, so that is a downgrade as well. Power said Roth just downgraded the Baltimore game and the Atlanta game again. That is not what I was hoping to see. By the way, is it Roth or is he still on vacation or celebrating his birthday or whatever he was doing? Just out of curiosity, I hadn't seen when he was supposed to come back. So that's not ideal, but definitely keep an eye on those. So yeah, again, for the pitching here, neither guy a priority, but Morton would be the one that I look to first. He does have the better strikeout matchup, better matchup overall, and he is the better strikeout pitcher as well. So far this season, as a starter, Morton has struck out 20.5% of hitters. He struck out 24% last year. Better strikeout stuff than Kohanowitz in a better strikeout matchup. Offensively, you do have a lot of runs pretty likely to be scored in this game. Good park for hitting in Baltimore. Good for left-handed power in particular, which does favor the Orioles. The Angels have plenty of power in their lineup, but most of it does come from the right side, and it is not nearly as easy to hit home runs to left field in Camden Yards as it is to right field, even with them moving the wall back in some this year. It didn't come as far. It didn't come all the way back in. It is still a favorable park for left-handed power in particular. So for the Orioles, you have 17% ownership coming into Adley Rutschman. You have 23% coming into Gunnar. You have 20% to Holiday, 15% to Mullins, 12% to O'Hearn, 11% to Laureano. Very popular Baltimore team here, and I think they should be popular. I also think on a 12-game slate, those numbers are high, going a bit over-owned. 12% chance of being optimal for Adley at just 3,900 at catcher. Obviously not having a great season in terms of actual production, but his expected numbers have been quite a bit better than his actual numbers. Gunnar, 10% chance of being optimal. Like, that's high for a 12-game slate. It's just not as high as the 23% ownership he's projected for. Same goes for Holiday at about a 10% chance of being optimal at 20% owned. So I think the Orioles are a likely team to succeed. They do look good. But again, you'll just want to be wary of that ownership. But it is a 12-game slate, so there's many ways you can handle that. You can use them as mini stacks with lower owned full stacks. You can use them with, low owned pitching. Charlie Morton, for example, get some positive correlation with the Orioles at low ownership. You can pair them with, an unowned mini stack. There's going to be a lot of ways that you can go if you do want to get to the Orioles, but they are going to get ownership because they have one of the highest team totals on the board, and they're cheap. Again, that $3,900 price tag on Adley, very good point per dollar play. Gunner's only $4,700. The two most expensive hitters in this lineup are Gunnar and O'Hearn, each at $4,700. Pretty cheap price tags, pretty cheap stack. So they are going to get a bunch of ownership. On the Angel side against Morton, again, it is a high upside spot, but I do wish that they had more left-handed power just to be able to take advantage of this ballpark. That being said, though, Neto gives you stolen base upside in addition to some power upside. Trout is Trout. Adele's been hitting well lately. Sean Noel doesn't have the best power, but he is left-handed and does have some power. They apparently, as I'm just finding out right now, have Lamont Wade right now. If you want to play the narrative angle, he is from Baltimore, went to the University of Maryland, so homecoming game for him. Not that that actually matters at all, but he is cheap. Soler has power here. So the Angels are getting a lot less ownership than the Orioles, which I think they should, but it does make them interesting in tournaments, just given that Morton certainly isn't an elite pitcher by any stretch. About 5 to 6% ownership to pretty much everybody on the Angels, outside of 8% coming into Mike Trout, 5 to 8% chances of being optimal. So I think the Angels ownership pretty much in line with where it should be. Neto is pretty expensive, but other than that, the only hitter in this lineup at 5K is Mike Trout, and then it gets really cheap. So I like both sides here. I do prefer the Orioles side, certainly, but I would say that I think the ownership gap is wider than it should be. Like, I think the Orioles, like, ownership on the Orioles probably should be like 1.5 to 2 to 1 compared to the Angels instead of 3 or 4 to 1 like it is in some cases. So I think from an ownership standpoint, ownership is more in line with where it should be on the Angels, but the Orioles are the team that's more likely to succeed here. Better matchup probably against Kahanowitz. Not somebody that I'm a very big believer in, but more importantly, just the power upside for the Orioles in Camden Yards is much better than it is for the Angels because the Orioles are a left-handed heavy lineup, whereas the Angels are a right-handed heavy lineup. Tampa Bay taking on the Mets in New York. Clay Holmes and Taj Bradley squaring off in this one. Bradley coming in at $7,400. Holmes coming in at $9,000. 11% projected ownership coming into Holmes, about 6% to Bradley. Only about a 3% chance of being optimal for Bradley. Really tough matchup for him here. He hasn't been particularly good this season either. We've seen a drop off from him. Strikeout percentage down to 21%. Stuff plus grade is down 9 points from last year. Pitching plus grade is down 10 points. Location plus grade is the same as last year, but he's never had particularly good command. Below average location plus grade both last year and this year. He's somebody that in the past has had very good stuff, and now the stuff is grading out closer to average. So you're seeing that drop off in strikeout percentage, and then now you're getting this matchup with the Mets, who obviously are a very good team, very good offense, and they rank 25th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. So if you are going to Bradley, it's a combination of he's only $7,400, and there is underlying talent here. Like we've seen it from Taj Bradley in previous seasons. We haven't really seen a ton of it this year, but that doesn't mean it's completely gone forever. Maybe today's the day it turns around, but it's certainly not the matchup where I would expect it to. On the other side, more interested in Clay Holmes here at $9K, obviously a bit more expensive, but does have a solid strikeout matchup against the Rays, fourth highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching for Tampa. They have been an above average offense as well. They rank 9th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching, but they are getting out of the minor league stadium they play in Tampa. They're going into Citi Field, so you're not going to get the wind-blown pop-up turned into home runs that you get occasionally in Tampa. You're going to have to actually hit legitimate home runs if you're going to hit it out in Citi Field. And Holmes is a solid enough pitcher. So the strikeout upside combined with a reasonable 9K price tag, I think looks pretty good. 21.5% K percentage for Holmes this year. Certainly not great, but good enough. Above average location plus, pitching plus, slightly above average stuff plus. So I do think he looks solid here. Not a true priority, but certainly somebody at 9K that should get 10 to 15% ownership here for the Mets. Offensively, on the Tampa side, no ownership and no real priorities here on a 12-game slate for the Rays. Nobody's getting ownership. Highest optimal rates are Brandon Lau and Junior Caminero and Josh Lowe, all coming in at about 3%. I don't think there's a lot you need to say there other than there is talent on Tampa Bay. If you just want a very low-owned Tampa Bay team, go for it. But not like it's a great spot against Holmes, not like it's a great park for offense, and it is a 12-game slate where you have plenty of good spots to get to. On the other side for the Mets, they do have a team total between 4.5 and 5 going up against Bradley. As I mentioned, Bradley has struggled this year so far against right-handed hitters. He has allowed a 125 expected ISO, 21.5% strikeout percentage, 152 expected ISO with a 21% strikeout percentage to lefties. So I do think it's important to note there that while Bradley has struggled from a DFS standpoint and a real-life standpoint, he still hasn't given up a ton of power. It's more so just been the lack of strikeout stuff. So if you're going to the Mets, I still don't think they're true priorities. It's more so just saying like, hey, this is a really good offense. They have a lot of talent. They are low owned. 4% projected ownership coming into Juan Soto is the high mark for the Mets. You're getting around 3% to most of the rest of the offense. So there's always going to be merit in large field tournaments to just saying, oh, I can get Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, etc., Francisco Lindor at sub 5% owned and just hope they have a good game. Like, sure. But again, there's just going to be better spots to prioritize in terms of the things that are most likely to succeed. But I do think the Mets are going a little under-owned here. 9 or 8% chance of being optimal for Soto at 4% owned, 6% chance of being optimal for Nimmo at 3% owned, 5% for Lindor and Alonso at 2 to 3% owned. So not a high probability team in the sense of their chances of being the winning stack, but I do think their ownership is about half of where it should be from just an optimal standpoint, which does make them interesting both as a full stack and also as just contrarian ways to get upside into your lineup. If you go to the Orioles, for example, you have plenty of money to go to a 5% or 4% Juan Soto, to go to Pete Alonso at first base. So the Mets are kind of the perfect team you could like mix in with the Orioles, for example, to offset some of that ownership and get a lot of upside in your lineup. Reds are taking on the Tigers in Detroit. Significant park downgrade for the Reds, playing in Comerica instead of Great American. Nick Martinez going for the Reds. Brant Herter opening for the Tigers. Keter Montero, I believe, expected to follow. $6,000 price tag on Montero. About a 3% chance of being optimal at 3% owned. Nick Martinez, 7,200. Tough spot for him. 6% ownership, 4.5% chance of being optimal. He's somebody that if he just kind of lands in a lineup in a set of 150 at 7,200, fine. He's not a terrible pitcher. He's not a great pitcher. He's kind of just there. So far this season, striking out 17.5% of hitters. But the matchup against the Tigers, obviously difficult. One of the best teams in baseball. They rank 12th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They do rank 5th in strikeout percentage, so they have that going for them. From a splits standpoint, Martinez has struck out 20.5% of lefties with a 175 expected ISO, 19% of righties with a 129 expected ISO. So not a high strikeout percentage to either side of the plate, slightly higher against lefties. But lefties have done more expected damage as well, which, doesn't line up great with a Tigers team that has Kerry Carpenter, that has Riley Green, two of the best hitters on this team being left-handed. He does have the platoon advantage against Torkelson. Colt Keith has some power as well. Wenceel Perez is not terrible, batting 6th from the left side. You have a predominantly left-handed, or you have 5 lefties, 4 righties for the Tigers, but 3 of those lefties are in the top 5. I don't think they look like a priority team, though. They're another one of these just good offense, getting no ownership. If you want unowned Kerry Carpenter, Riley Green, Torkelson, etc., go for it. But 2 to 4% chance of being optimal for all of these guys. So no real priorities that stand out from the Tigers. And like I said, there's no glaring splits for Nick Martinez either, but he does give up a little bit more power to lefties. He does benefit from pitching in Comerica, though. For Keter Montero, 240 expected ISO allowed to lefties this year, only 129 to righties. Strikeout percentage against lefties is 8 points lower as well. So you will prefer left-handed bats from the Reds. The problem, though, is that the first time through the order, they will have the lefty-lefty matchup. The second problem is there's only 3 of them in the lineup. TJ Friedel leading off, but again, first matchup will be against Herter. Ellie De La Cruz batting 3rd, switch hitter, so he'll always have the platoon advantage, but he will be from the weaker side in his first at-bat. And then Gavin Lux hitting 7, may or may not face Herter the first time through. But it's not a Cincinnati team that lines up particularly well from a splits standpoint against Montero. De La Cruz, 6% chance of being optimal at 4% owned. Encarnacion Strand is still very cheap, 3,200, first base and third base eligible at 3,200. Does have power upside, 6.5% chance of being optimal for him at 6% owned. Tyler Stevenson, $3,500 catching option with some power. So again, not the correct side of the platoon split against Montero, but still a catcher with some power. Overall, though, Reds not any sort of a priority. Basically 3 to 6% chance of being optimal for all these guys. Encarnacion Strand from a value standpoint, and then De La Cruz just from a pure upside standpoint. Massive stolen base upside, some home run upside, but it would certainly be a lot higher in other parks. Those are the 2 that stand out the most, using the word stand out very loosely. Yankees facing the Red Sox in Fenway Park. Always fun when these 2 square off, and generally fun to play hitters in either of their home parks. We know Fenway and Yankee Stadium, both very good for offense. Here we get them in Fenway. Garrett Crochet taking on Ryan Yarbrough. So Garrett Crochet, obviously going to be one of your highest projected pitchers on any slate that he is on. $10,800. Always scary to pay that price for a pitcher against the Yankees, just given how good the Yankees are. But Garrett Crochet, obviously, also very, very good as well. So far this season, striking out 31.3% of hitters. That is down 4 points from last year. He has seen a little bit of a drop-off in his stuff. Still well above average, though, at 113.7. Has seen a bigger drop-off in his command, his location. So that's the bigger concern for him. But again, when you're talking about somebody as talented as Crochet, and you're talking about concerns, it's all relative. You're not very concerned about somebody as good as Crochet. The bigger concern here is simply the matchup. Having to face a lineup that has Aaron Judge is never going to be easy. Plenty of other good hitters, of course, as well in this lineup. But Crochet getting 31 to 32% ownership here, 30% chance of being optimal. You have plenty of value bats that you can get to on this slate, with there being 12 games to afford Crochet. So risky spot, but I think still does look good. And you have to keep in mind that, everything is in the context of this slate too. Like if you look at the other pitching options that are going today that are on this slate, you have Yamamoto, who has a 29.5% strikeout percentage at home against the Giants. Logan Webb, 28.5% K percentage, but he is facing the Dodgers. And then you get a drop off to, Paul Skeen's not on the slate. You drop down to like Freddie Peralta with a 24.5% K percentage. So there, and Gavin Williams at 25%. So there is a pretty big drop off in K percentage after the top three of Crochet, Yamamoto, and Webb. And two of those guys have very difficult matchups, with Crochet facing the Yankees and Webb facing the Dodgers. So it doesn't get you very far if you just say, well, I don't want to play Crochet because the matchup scares me, because either you're just basically going to punt on the best strikeout pitchers on the slate because you're scared of the matchups outside of Yamamoto, or you're going to just suck it up and play some Garrett Crochet where you can afford him, because obviously matchup is factored into projection, and he still projects well here. 21 DraftKings points for the slate. That is the highest fantasy point projection ahead of Yamamoto. So, again, he would just be projected better if he were facing a different team. On the other side, Yarborough going up against the Red Sox at 7K. Not much interest there. 2% ownership, 7% chance of being optimal. So going a little bit under-owned, but nothing that looks like any sort of a priority. 22% strikeout percentage through his first 30 innings pitched as a starter this year. Command has been good. Stuff has been average. He is left-handed, and so he has the platoon advantage against Devers and Duran, which is always something that you like to see when you're going up against the Red Sox. He has struck out 22% of lefties so far this year with an expected ISO below 100. Going back to last year, 22.5% K percentage against lefties, 118 expected ISO. So this Red Sox lineup is righty-heavy overall. Actually, you don't even have Duran in it. You have Roman Anthony and Rafael Devers from the left side. So I'm not mentioning those left-handed splits because he's going to face a lot of lefties. I'm mentioning it because the two guys in this lineup that you're most afraid of are Rafael Devers and probably Roman Anthony. So he will have the platoon advantage there, which is nice. But again, you're just not going to want to prioritize Yarborough here, I don't think. Crochet, clearly the pitching priority in this one. Eric Hoffman said, what pitchers are we fading because of weather? The two games with weather that are up in the air right now are the Baltimore game and the Braves game. So again, if the slate started right now, I think I would just be playing those games. But the relevant pitchers, basically, that could be affected by the weather would be Charlie Morton, who is relevant sort of just like as a value play, but not a priority. Bryce Elder is the one that, he has the matchup at home against the Rockies. If you had perfect weather, you're just running him out there a bunch, even though he's not great himself. The weather could, screw him up. So that will be something to pay attention to. Offensively, in the Yankees and Red Sox game, obviously brutal spot for the Yankees. If you're going to go there, it's the Yankees. They're facing a pitcher that's getting 30% ownership, and they're in Fenway Park, but they're facing one of the best pitchers in baseball. Aaron Judge, the only guy here getting more than 5% ownership. He's coming in at about 6%, 6% chance of being optimal. Other than that, basically 2 to 3% chance of being optimal on the Yankees. So very low probability stack there. They do get boosted a little bit because of the negative correlation with Crochet. Don't know why I just wanted to start calling him Contreras for some reason, but it's still obviously very low probability spot. Better spot for the Red Sox, but still low ownership, still low chance of being optimal overall. 5% ownership coming into Carlos Narvaez and Romy Gonzalez leading the way. 5% optimal percentage for Devers, 4% for Narvaez and Campbell. One other thing that I will point out with the Red Sox lineup is that you get even more pinch hit risk here than you normally do because of Jarren Duran coming off the bench. So you have Rob Refsnyder leading off. He is 4,300, has the platoon advantage. All that's great, but very likely that he is not finishing this game. Ceddanne Rafaela, right-handed in center field, but he's somebody that generally they're going to leave in for defense. You're probably getting Jarren Duran hitting for Refsnyder as soon as Refsnyder comes up against the right-handed pitcher. So if you are using our projections, you can scroll over here. You can see the 48% pinch hit probability on Rob Refsnyder, 31% on Gonzalez. I think that might be a little high just because I'm not sure what they'll do at first base. Obviously, it's the team that's shorthanded at first base. But Refsnyder, for sure, massive pinch hit risk with Devers Duran rather not starting. So no priorities offensively here. Red Sox do have, a better matchup simply because they're not facing Garrett Crochet. Rockies facing the Braves in Atlanta. As mentioned, there are weather issues here that we need to pay attention to. Bryce Elder is certainly a relevant pitching play. $7,800 price tag. getting 23% ownership. He projects as one of the highest scoring pitchers on the slate, certainly one of the best value pitchers. We have him with the 5th highest fantasy point projection overall. But as you can see here, when you consider the range of outcomes, the volatility in pitching, you can kind of order this entire group any way that you want, and it's going to be completely defensible. So he looks like a good value here. Goes without saying, you're getting the Rockies outside of Colorado. Overall, they have the 2nd highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching, 1/10 of a point behind the Red Sox. But again, Colorado, Coors Field, very difficult place to strike out, and the strikeout percentage is not park adjusted. So the Rockies have the 2nd highest strikeout percentage despite playing in a park that is very difficult to strike out in. Now they are not playing in that park, and pretty much everywhere else is easier to strike out. So very, very good spot for Elder. He's not an elite pitcher himself by any means. 21% strikeout percentage this year, below average stuff, although it is up a bit from last year to 91.4. Has shown very good command, and that's driven up his pitching plus grade as well to an above average 103. The command, though, was about league average last year, 100.8 location plus grade. So far this year, 108.9. So that is where we have seen an improvement from Elder. And then again, the biggest thing here is just that you are getting this god-awful Rockies team. As far as splits go for Elder this season, 23% strikeout percentage against righties, 17.2% against lefties. The Rockies are running a right-handed heavy lineup out there because of course they are. 7 right-handed hitters, 2 left-handed hitters in the Rockies lineup. So that sets up well for Elder also. You do have that 4 to 5 point split for him, favoring strikeout percentage against righties compared to lefties. So Bryce Elder looks good. The biggest concern here is just what the weather does. It does look like a situation where if you get storms in Atlanta popping out ahead of the main line, you really could be in trouble. And anybody that's played MLB DFS for any amount of time is fully aware of how unpredictable storms in Atlanta are in general once you get to this time of the year. I don't know if there have been yet. I think there already has been like one, but there certainly will between now and the end of the year be slates where Atlanta weather doesn't even look bad. And then it's just like, oh shit, there's a storm right on top of the stadium because it's 95 degrees, humid, and now there's massive lightning and shit everywhere. So definitely some risk with the weather here, no doubt about it. For the bats on the Colorado side, if you want to negatively correlate against some Bryce Elder, like again, he's not a great pitcher, but the Rockies obviously don't give you a whole lot to work with. You would prefer left-handed bats against him. 179 expected ISO to lefties with the 17% K percentage, 183 to righties. So he does give up some power to both sides, but that strikeout percentage is better against the righties than the lefties. Ryan McMahon is your best left-handed hitter in this lineup. The only other option is Mickey Moniak. For McMahon, he is coming in at 3,300. He's batting cleanup, so like that all looks good. But 2% ownership, 5% chance of being optimal. Estrada, 5% chance of being optimal at 3% owned. Goodman, 5% at 3% owned. So again, the Rockies, the good hitters on the Rockies, I do think are going a little bit under owned, even without factoring in the negative correlation as well. Like Estrada at 2,700 batting second, McMahon batting cleanup, Goodman as a catcher at 4K, Jordan Beck batting leadoff at 3,700. Those guys are actually solid hitters, some more than others, but they're guys that can actually do damage. You get some stolen base upside in there as well. You can throw Brenton Doyle in there too. He has taken an unexpected step back this year after his huge breakout last year, but he does still give you stolen base upside. He is only 3,500. Like this 1 through 5 on Colorado isn't terrible. And then you have Moniak hitting 6th with, some power. So it's not as bad of a team and offense as the Rockies are. It's not crazy to consider them in tournaments, given that they are really cheap. You will have stolen base upside, power upside, negative correlation from the top part of this order, and you'll have the ability to just maximize everything else in your lineup, but it's still the Rockies. Atlanta on the other side, one of, if not the highest team totals on the slate. They obviously look very good here going up against German Marquez. Marquez is $4,500. I forgot to even touch on him as a pitcher. He's $4,500, which by definition is underpriced, but still like a 3% chance of being optimal at no ownership. It's pretty crazy how drastically he has fallen off over the years, in part due to injury, but you're getting a park upgrade for him, but he's still facing the Braves, still a really, really tough spot, obviously, and not a slate where I think you're really going to need him. For the bats here against Marquez, Ronald Acuna getting 17% ownership, Austin Riley getting 11%. They do look to be going a bit over-owned here, even though it is a solid spot. Acuna optimal about 8% of the time, Riley about 6%, same for Matt Olson at 8% owned, 5% optimal rate, 4 to 5% for Harris, for Albies, for Murphy, for Verdugo. So the Braves are kind of similar to the Orioles in that they look good. They're in a good spot, but they are going a bit over-owned. The Orioles as a whole are getting more ownership and do also have higher optimal rates, but pretty similar where, it's going to feel good to click on them. And the ownership's not, crazy out of control. There's only 2 guys on Atlanta projected for more than 10%. So far this season, Marquez against lefties, allowing a 212 expected ISO. Righties only at 144. So you do have the power splits favoring Matt Olson in particular, but also, Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Verdugo, not the best power hitters outside of Olson, but I do really like the spot for Olson in particular. Acuna, goes without saying, is great if you can get to him. And one thing to keep in mind with Acuna too is he does look like kind of relatively better on a slate like this when Aaron Judge is facing Crochet, because one problem that Acuna runs into generally is he's great, but you have Aaron Judge having like the best season ever, at the very least the best season since Barry Bonds played, and he's always only a couple $100 more. Here you get Acuna facing Marquez versus Judge facing Crochet, so you do actually have a slightly higher optimal rate today on Ronald Acuna. I do still like this price tag on Riley at 4,700 as well. I've mentioned it a lot on shows lately, but his expected production, the power upside he has, really hasn't justified his price tag being in like the mid 4K range, but it has stayed there. White Sox facing the Rangers in Texas, about a 5 total for the Rangers, around 4 for the White Sox. On the mound for Texas, we have Sean Armstrong opening, so obviously that kind of makes pitching for the Rangers not look great in a spot where normally they would. For the White Sox, you have Adrian Hauser, so not going to be particularly interested in pitching here. I don't think there's a whole lot to say there. The Rangers have Dane Dunning most likely following Armstrong from what I'm seeing, but I'm not sure if he's even in the player pool. Trying to pull that up now. But yeah, either way, I don't think we're looking at pitching in this one. I did just want to confirm whether or not Dunning is even in the DraftKings pool. Does not look like he is, so we can ignore that one. Offensively here, the White Sox are going to be cheap as usual. They are not really getting much ownership, sub 5% to everybody. Vargas and Benintendi are 2 guys that I have been playing a decent amount of lately, and they do once again look like they're going a little under-owned. Devin Scott said Dunning hasn't been activated yet. May save him for Sunday since they're going bullpen game again on Sunday. Yes, that's interesting. I guess something we'll have to pay attention to. Either way, like if they don't activate him, I assume it's just like an actual bullpen game. I don't think there's anything right now, at least, that we could go to as pitching from Texas. Yeah, I don't really see anything here. There's no like probable long reliever listed on DraftKings. The places I do look has Dunning. So yeah, it's not like yesterday you had Dean Kramer for the Orioles following Keegan Aiken and everybody knew it. It's not one of those situations. So for the bats here, that does make it a not great spot for the White Sox. Not that there's ever a great spot for the White Sox, but getting bullpen games in 2025 when the worst relievers on the worst teams throw 97 miles an hour is not ideal. From a pricing standpoint, though, 2,800 for Benintendi, 2,900 for Vargas with MPE. Those are both reasonable. 5 to 7% chances of being optimal for those guys. 5% for Meadroth, for Kyle Teal, for Luis Robert. Like the White Sox are technically going under-owned, but they're just another one of these teams with like 2 to 3% ownership and a 4 or 5% chance of being optimal. I think if you're using them, it's, again, like I was saying with the Rockies, it's very similar to the White Sox and the Rockies, I think, except for the Rockies do give you that negative correlation against Elder. So the Rockies are a little bit stronger than the White Sox just because they're both low probability teams. They both suck. They're both unlikely to do well. But at least if the Rockies do well, not only do you have low owned hitters scoring fantasy points, you also have 20-25% of the field that has a pitcher that is not doing well. Whereas for the White Sox, you're solely benefiting from those hitters because nobody's playing Sean Armstrong or whatever else is coming out of the Rangers bullpen. So I do think that makes the Rockies in a GPP, large field GPP format or even small field GPP, a little bit ahead of the White Sox, but they're very similar in that if you're going to them, it's not because you expect a ton out of them. It's because if you do get reasonable production out of them, you have, Ronald Acuna, Gunnar Henderson, Aaron Judge, whatever one-offs you want around them, whatever secondary stacks, whatever pitching. So that's the benefit. Also, if you're going to an expensive stack, you can just throw like Vargas and Benintendi in there, get a couple of good enough hitters at cheap price tags. But overall, White Sox certainly not any level of a priority. On the Texas side, 5 to 6% ownership coming into Seager, to Semien, to Langford, to Smith. Very similar optimal rates for them as their ownership, pretty much in line with the field. We've gotten a couple of starts now from Hauser since joining the White Sox, so limited sample, but so far only a 120 expected ISO allowed to lefties, righties sub 100. He's actually struck righties out at a 27% clip as well, but that's probably a sample size thing. But even going back to last year, 185 expected ISO to lefties, relatively high, only 124 to righties. So you do have the platoon advantage for Seager, for Smith, for Evan Carter at 4K, who we have seen do some damage. They're in Texas, which is a good park for home runs. So I do think all those guys are interesting, but in the context of a 12-game slate, still secondary plays. I do want to check the White Sox bullpen also. Generally, they have a few lefties that can go to. Tyler Alexander and Cam Boozer both should be available today, along with Brandon Eisert, who is part of their closer by committee. So they do have 3 lefties in their bullpen. That is a little bit of a downgrade for Seager, for Smith, for Carter, just because once you get past Adrian Hauser, it is going to be that much easier for the White Sox to actually match up with the lefties in this lineup. Twins taking on the Astros in Houston, 4 to 4.5 implied total for both of these teams. For the Twins, Chris Paddock. For the Astros, Colton Gordon. Gordon only 6,600. Looks like the better value of the two, given that he is $500 less expensive, and they do project similarly, as you can see on the screen. Neither one getting much ownership. 6% coming into Paddock, 4% coming into Gordon, 5% chance of being optimal for Gordon, 5% chance of being optimal for Paddock. So very, very similar plays when you factor in range of outcomes and the salary being functionally the same. They both just kind of land in that bucket with like Charlie Morton, with there was a 70 with Yarborough, there was another like $7,200 pitcher that I'd mentioned somewhere. Bradley, maybe, where like if they land in a lineup, fine, but you're not going out of your way to get to either one of these guys. The matchup isn't horrible for either one, but it's not great for either one either. Astros against right-handed pitching so far this season ranked 23rd in strikeout percentage. So that's not ideal for Paddock. They also rank 20th in WRC plus, which is nice. Twins against left-handed pitching ranked 12th in strikeout percentage. They rank 18th in WRC plus since last year on their active roster. So, decent, but not great matchups for either guy. As far as splits go this season, so far Paddock allowing a 190 expected ISO to righties, 166 to lefties. Strikeout percentage is about 8 points higher to righties than to lefties. So that is something that benefits him in this matchup against Houston, because Houston does not believe in left-handed hitters. Yordan Alvarez on the injured list. So the only lefty you have in this lineup for the Astros is Jacob Melton. That does increase the Paddock strikeout upside a little bit, but it's still not like it's easy facing Pena, Diaz, Altuve, Walker at the top of that order, even though they have underperformed a bit this year. It does drop off a bit, though, as you go down the lineup. So, again, secondary play for Paddock. Same for Gordon. Right-handed heavy lineup. Only one lefty in it for Minnesota, with Matt Wallner DHing so far this season. Limited sample for Gordon as a rookie. He has struck righties out 21% of the time. He's only thrown 79 pitches to lefties. He has a 35% strikeout percentage against them, but I'm guessing that's, less than 20 hitters or something. So not much to take away there, other than you assume he's going to be better against lefties than righties, and he's going to be facing 8 righties here. So secondary, just kind of value option, low owned value on either of those guys. Neither one is a priority, though, and it's going to look similar for the bats, I think, although I do think Minnesota is going a little under-owned here. They're getting some ownership, 5 to 10% to most of their relevant bats. Buxton at 7%, Lewis at about 8%, 2,700 batting 5th. Correa getting 6%, Jeffers getting 8%, Castro getting 6%. And we have about a 12% chance of Byron Buxton being optimal, about 10% for Royce Lewis. I mentioned it the other day on Lewis. He hasn't been off to a good start this year, but we know the type of upside he has. We've seen him, dominate when he's healthy in the major league so far in his young career, and his expected stats this year are solid. It's not like he's fallen off of a cliff in terms of quality of contact or anything like that. We only have 30 plate appearances against lefties, so there's nothing to take away there, but When I was looking at it the other day, it was against righties in particular. So I'm going to pull that up now just so I can mention it, because chances are he's going to end up better against lefties than righties, given that he is a right-handed hitter. But against righties this year, which again, Gordon's a lefty, but just bear with me, only a 100 actual ISO and a 231 actual WOBA, 225 expected ISO, 356 expected WOBA, only 76 plate appearances against righties, so very small sample there, only 30 against lefties. My point there, though, is that he's making quality contact overall, and there's no reason to think that Lewis is going to be like worse against lefties than righties. So you assume he's just going to kind of be what he is, or has been throughout his career sooner than later. And that's a very high upside player that is only $2,700 batting fifth. Carlos Correa, kind of the same thing. 3,500 hasn't been good this year. So different in that regard, where even his expected numbers aren't great, but we have a long track record of Carlos Correa being a quality hitter. And if you only make him $3,500, you alleviate some of the issues that we've seen, some of the concern that we've seen over the first couple months of the season. 6% chance of being optimal for him, 6% for Jeffers, for Castro. Jeffers batting second, 3,700 at catcher, gives you a power bat. And you do have, as Aggressive Goose mentioned, the Crawford box is in left field here at Houston as well. If you can just pull fly balls as a right-handed hitter, you're hitting home runs in this park. So it does play up right-handed power in particular. So that is something working in the Twins' favor. Also, when you have Buxton, Lewis, Correa, Jeffers, like these guys, you can add Ty France, you can add Bader to that. Like these guys have clearly the ability to hit home runs to left field in Houston, even if they're not all the best, the most powerful hitters in the league. So I do like Minnesota here. On the other side for Houston, Paddock does give up some power to righties, as I mentioned, and that's not what you want to do in Houston. So Yainer Diaz, Walker, Altuve, Pena, all secondary options here. 8% chance of being optimal to Diaz leads the way, followed by 7% to Walker, 6% to Altuve. But the thing that I like the most about the Astros, it is a relatively weak lineup top to bottom, but the top of it is fine. And they're cheap because they have underperformed as a whole this year. So just getting 3,400 to Diaz as a catcher who hasn't hit for a ton of power this year, but we know has it. We've seen him do it in the major leagues before. Christian Walker, 3,500, somebody that most seasons has an ISO above 200 by the end of the year. Jose Altuve, 4,100, second base outfield. Pena, 4,500 with some power and stolen base upside. This is just one of those teams where, yeah, maybe they're not great. They're not the best offense, but they have enough pedigree. They have enough talent here that when you factor in the salary, it's not even so much point per dollar looks great. Like it looks fine, but it's more so thinking about it in terms of like upside per dollar or ceiling per dollar, because, all hitters are not created equal. You can have plenty of hitters that project well on a point per dollar basis, but their projection is being driven completely by singles, and that's not likely to win you tournaments. So one of the things that, I've mentioned I really like about our projections is that you get the detailed results of our in-house play-by-play sims. So, if you are somebody that's hand building, for example, you can make decisions by exactly how players are likely to get their fantasy production. And, you can see pretty high home run projections, relatively high home run projections for Diaz, for Pena, for Walker, for Altuve, and, pretty high doubles projections here as well. So it's not like these are guys that are good point per dollar projections because they're cheap and they put the ball in play a lot. Like they're not Luis Ariz where you're hoping you get 4 singles and score 2 runs or something like that. These are guys that can do legitimate damage, even though they haven't necessarily gotten off to the best start so far this season. Cardinals are taking on Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, Brewers have Freddie Peralta on the mound in a tough strikeout matchup. The Cardinals have Eric Fedde going at $6,900. Fedde, 2% chance of being optimal, 2% ownership. Not a lot to say there. Peralta getting 17% ownership, 15% chance of being optimal. And this just goes back to what I was saying when I was talking about Garrett Crochet and him having a tough matchup against the Yankees. Peralta doesn't have the best matchup here against the Cardinals. The Cards rank 11th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year. They rank 27th in strikeout percentage. Peralta's $9,500, which is relatively expensive. Peralta's strikeout percentage this year is down about 3 points from last year to 24.5%. His stuff plus grade is up, though, so that's good to see. His command is down a little bit, but nothing drastic. His velocity is fine. So I do think you probably see Peralta's strikeout stuff rebound. But it just goes back to, if you're shying away from Peralta because he's in a tough matchup, you're shying away from Crochet because he's in a tough matchup, you're going to shy away from Webb because he's in a tough matchup, you start to just give up a lot of raw talent upside that these guys give you that have the best strikeout percentages on the slate. The Cardinals are using a lineup that is predominantly right-handed. They have 4 lefties, 5 righties, but 3 righties in the top 5, 4 righties in the top 6. That does generally play to Freddie Peralta's strengths. 26.5% K percentage against righties this year compared to 23% against lefties. Last year, he was more neutral. He actually had a slightly higher strikeout percentage against lefties. But if you go back prior to that, in 2023, a 36% K percentage to righties compared to 26% to lefties. So he hasn't always had traditional splits, but he's basically either neutral or traditional splits for the most part throughout his career. And so far this year, we have seen a little bit higher strikeout percentage to righties, and you are getting a predominantly right-handed lineup for the Cards. So that does favor him a little bit as well, even though it's not a perfect matchup. Cardinals bats against him, nothing that stands out. 12-game slate, just not super interested in targeting the most talented pitchers on the slate. The Cards are a good enough offense, but there's nothing that even really stands out. 141 expected ISO to lefties for Peralta this year, 167 to righties. There's not even like anything that I can really point to that you would want to target other than just if you want to play the best hitters on the Cardinals, then do that. But nothing that really stands out there. You are getting a home run park upgrade as well for the Cards, but again, just not a team that I would be looking to prioritize. The Brewers do look a little bit more interesting here. Feddy's certainly not nearly the same quality of pitcher that Freddie Peralta is. Lefties have a 204 expected ISO against him with just a 13% K percentage this year. Righties, 168 expected ISO, 17% K percentage. So you do prefer left-handed power here. Not sure if we have a Brewers lineup confirmed yet. Yep. Sal Frelick leading off from the left side. Yelich batting cleanup from the left side. Collins 6th, 2-ranked 7. So it does suck that 2-ranked hitting 7th for a couple of reasons. One is that he is relatively expensive at $4,500, and now obviously you are lowering your plate appearance projection. You can see here that when I ran stuff, he was projected to lead off. So 7% chance of being optimal with the projection I had, but that projection will come down a little bit because he's not leading off. The other thing, though, is that his stolen base projection drops a little bit because when you're leading off, you're guaranteed at least one at bat where if you get on base, there's nobody blocking you from stealing. And when you're batting 7th, obviously you're more likely to be in a position where you're just blocked from stealing. But as a team, Milwaukee will run, as Devin Scott just mentioned. So you do get added upside there. Turang will run. Even William Contreras will run a bit. If you scroll over, look at the stolen base projections here. Turang, Yelich, Churio, Contreras, Frelick, Durbin, Collins, like these guys all have reasonable, even Joey Ortiz have reasonable stolen base projections, some obviously higher than others, but it's a team that does have power upside, does have stolen base upside. They're in a good park for hitting home runs. They're affordable. The most expensive hitter in this lineup is Jackson Chourio at $4,600, Turang $4,500, $4,400 for Yelich, Contreras $4,200, one of your higher upside catching options. So I do like the Brewers quite a bit. I think they're going a little bit under-owned. 6% ownership coming into Yelich, 5% to Contreras. I think a little bit under-owned for Milwaukee. I like the spot here. I like the fact that they give you power upside in addition to stolen base upside. Sal Frelick also 3,800 leading off. So, I mentioned the drop, a little bit of a drop that you're going to see in projection for Turang. A little bit of an upgrade for Sal Frelick leading off, just given that, he'll get more plate appearances. As far as left-handed relievers for the Cardinals, they do generally have a few, I believe. They have 3. Steven Matz, Jojo Romero, neither one of them have pitched in a long time, so they're definitely available. John King pitched yesterday through 17 pitches. He's probably available. So you do have 3 lefties that are likely available in that Cardinals bullpen. That is a little bit of a downgrade for the left-handed bats in the stack here, just because it can be a matchup problem. But one thing that is nice about the way Milwaukee constructed their lineup, if you bring a lefty in to face Sal Frelick, that lefty has to also face Churio and Contreras, unless, you bring him in with 2 outs. If you bring him in to face Christian Yelich, he has to deal with Rhys Hoskins on deck. Collins will hit from the right side as well. So you don't have any lefties back-to-back. That does make it a little bit more difficult for the Cardinals to bring lefties in and match up. Devin Scott mentioned the, potential of getting Hoskins against a lefty out of the bullpen. Certainly true. So I do like Milwaukee overall. A's going into Kansas City, significant park downgrade in terms of home run power, home run upside for them, getting out of their fake ballpark in Sacramento and going into a huge stadium in Kansas City. Michael Wacha facing off against Luis Severino, $6,700 price tag for Severino, not getting any ownership, coming in around 3% chance of being optimal. Very, very tough strikeout matchup for him against KC at home. Wacha on the other side, getting about 10% ownership, about an 8% chance of being optimal at 7,500. He looks fine. It is a park downgrade for these A's bats. There are strikeouts in the lineup. You do have Jacob Wilson back, so that drives down the strikeout projection just because the dude hitting second is never going to strike out. But there are strikeouts overall that you can get against this A's lineup. The bottom of the order certainly will give you plenty. Kurtz, Wins, Urias, Clark, 6 through 9 for this team. Muncy strikes out. He's batting 5th. So again, there's power upside for the A's, but the park, it's good for scoring runs. It's not good for hitting home runs. That can really hurt a team like the A's that is kind of hitting home runs or striking out a pretty high percentage of the time. A nice chunk of those would-be home runs are now warning track flyouts as well. So I do think Waka is a solid mid-range option in a similar bucket, different price point, but similar bucket to guys like Clay Holmes that we talked about earlier. Not interested in Severino here, though. For the A's, not overly interested. 4% ownership coming into Rooker, 5% chance of being optimal. He is 4,800, so that price tag has gone back up a little bit. Everybody else, sub 4% projected ownership, sub 4% chance of being optimal. Again, you have talent, you have upside for the A's, but you have upside in most major league lineups, and you have better hitting environments, better home run hitting environments, rather, in a lot of other cases. Waka so far this season, 159 expected ISO to lefties, 171 to righties. So a little bit of reverse splits power there. Nothing too drastic, though. Not super surprising. He's somebody that throws his changeup 35% of the time to lefties, has a 19% swinging strike percentage on it. It's a pitch that historically has done very well against opposite-handed hitters. So not super interested in the A's. For Kansas City, a little bit better spot for them and a little bit more talent, I guess is the right word, or at least guys that you like from a DFS standpoint because of pricing, position, whatever it may be. Bobby Witt Jr. obviously leading the way as usual. 12% ownership, 12% chance of being optimal. $5,400 price tag is relatively cheap for him, so you like to see that as well. Severino, I'm sure, is happy to be pitching anywhere other than Sacramento. He hasn't been bad this year in terms of expected power numbers allowed. 131 expected ISO to righties, 148 to lefties, but Kansas City is just looking pretty good from a value standpoint. Mid-4s team total. Witt obviously drives things both as a one-off and as a stacking piece. But Salvador Perez, 3,100 as a catcher. Not having a good year offensively, but his expected numbers are actually good. Again, he's playing in Kauffman Stadium. He's slow as shit. So, his expected numbers are probably going to outpace his actual numbers anyway. But a 217 expected ISO, 352 expected WOBA. That's good for a $3,100 catcher. Michael Garcia gives you some stolen base upside, 4,600 at third base. Jonathan India is cheap, batting leadoff, 3,400. You have Caglione, 3,300 with immense power upside, first base and outfield eligible. So I like the upside that KC gives you because they're a team too. And I talk about this a lot with the Mariners in Seattle, different reasons, but I don't mind the Mariners as much in Seattle as I generally don't want the opposing team because it's playing their games in that park is baked into Seattle's price generally. That is true for Kansas City, but then also for Kansas City, where their park is substantially different than Seattle, where Seattle's bad for hitting home runs and Seattle's bad for scoring runs. KC is good for scoring runs. It's bad for hitting home runs, but Kansas City has built this team to play in that park. So you have stolen base upside from Witt. You have stolen base upside from Garcia in particular. You have other guys that will run a bit as well if they get on base down at the bottom of the order like Kyle Isbell. So they are a team that's built to take advantage of this park, and they can kind of helps make up for the relative lack of home run upside. The home run numbers here, they're not nothing, but certainly not as high as some other teams. But if you go and look at stolen base projections, very high for Witt, very high for Garcia, drops off for most of these other guys, but a little bit for Lofton, for Rave. If Isbell gets on base, he'll probably run, but obviously not going to get on base all that often. But it does just kind of help drive things, particularly for Witt and Garcia. So I think KC, from a value standpoint, looks pretty good. Only 3 guys are even 4K in this lineup, with Witt above 5K, Garcia at 4,600, and then Pasquantino at 4K flat. And it does help too that Caglione has outfield eligibility. So you can play him and Pasquantino together. India and Garcia are different positions now. For a little bit, they were both third base, I think. So there's not too much overlap here. Lofton has third base and outfield. So you don't have guys blocking each other out like you would if Caglione were only a first baseman, for example. San Diego taking on the Diamondbacks. High total in this one. For the Diamondbacks, we have Ryan Nelson. For the Padres, we have Steven Kolek. Tough matchup here for both of these guys. Two good offenses, two tough strikeout spots. The Padres rank 28th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. The Diamondbacks rank 19th. The Diamondbacks rank first now in WRC plus against right-handed pitching, just edging out the Dodgers and the Yankees. You've kind of just seen those three flip-flopping for most of the season. The Padres rank 10th. So two top 10 offenses here in WRC plus, two bottom 11 offenses in strikeout percentage. No interest in the pitching. For the bats, starting on the San Diego side, 12% ownership coming into Tatis. I think that is warranted. 12% chance of being optimal as well. He is only $4,700, which is a pretty crazy price tag for the talent that Fernando Tatis gives you. Gives you some stolen base upside, gives you some home run upside here. Not the highest in either of those categories, but this is somebody that usually is kind of, competing with, not fully, not all the way up to the Aaron Judge pricing tier, but kind of competing with like Judge, with Acuna, with those guys. He's at a completely different price point right now. So that looks very good. Manny Machado, 9% chance of being optimal at 7% owned, 5 to 8% for Bogarts, for Arise, for Cronenworth, for Merrill. 5 to 8% ownership on those guys as well. And another thing to like about the Padres here is that they're cheap. Machado's sub 5K. Tatis, as I mentioned, is sub 5K. Merrill 4,500, but then after that, Bogart's 3,200. Arise and Cronenworth are both less than 4K. Yes, Arise doesn't give you any home run upside, but he's 3,400, so he's priced to be the slap hitter that he is. As far as stacks go, he still makes some sense. Giving up first base sucks, but if he singles 4 times and scores 2 runs, he's getting driven in by those other guys in your stack. So not somebody that I love as a one-off. I'd rather go probably in a perfect world to Salvador Perez or Caglione at first base, just, 2 cheap guys in that range that I mentioned recently. But from a stacking standpoint, you can certainly go to a rise with the Padres. Gavin Sheets has power upside. He's 3,500. So I think the Padres look pretty good here, just again, from an upside per dollar standpoint, or however you want to think about that. You have Sheets batting 5th. We got that lineup since I started the show. Tatis, Arise, Machado, Merrill, Sheets, Bogarts, Cronenworth, 1 through 7. That's a solid stack to get to. I think it's affordable. It gives you a nice ceiling. So far this season, Nelson, limited sample, 126 expected ISO to lefties, 174 to righties. Go back to last year, 156 to lefties, 139 to righties. He's not a terrible pitcher. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. He does generally do a good job of limiting power, but the cheap price tags on the Padres combined with the raw power that most of them have and some stolen base upside too, just kind of alleviates most of my concern about Nelson being pretty good at limiting power. On the other side for the Diamondbacks, as I mentioned, great offense against right-handed pitching. Kolek so far this season, small sample size, but 175 expected ISO allowed to lefties. No power allowed whatsoever to righties, but also only a 12.5% strikeout percentage. If you go back to last year for Kolek, 134 expected ISO to righties, 121 to lefties. So another pitcher that's done a pretty good job of limiting power, but it's a team that just has a lot of it and has some stolen base upside too. Corbin Carroll, 5,900, Marte, 5,500. Those pieces obviously expensive. 8% ownership to Carroll with about a 7 or 8% chance of being optimal. 5% ownership coming into Marte with about a 5 or 6% chance of being optimal. And then it drops off from there. Sub 5% ownership to everybody else. Sub 5% chance of being optimal everywhere else. Still plenty of upside for Suarez, for Naylor. But I do prefer the Padres side here just because of the pricing. I think what you're going to be able to put around the Padres is just a little bit better than what you're able to put around a Diamondback stack. But the upside, independent of what you can do with the rest of your lineup, the upside for both of these teams is very high. Cleveland facing Seattle in a park where offense goes to die, which is going to give us a couple of reasonable pitching options here. Gavin Williams on the mound for Cleveland, Luis Castillo's corpse on the mound for the Mariners. Whatever team trades for Luis Castillo, or if a team trades for Luis Castillo at the deadline, they are going to be disappointed because this guy should not be allowed to leave Seattle. He does not have it anymore in terms of stuff or strikeout ability, but he is able to pitch in Seattle, which is where he is tonight. Stuff plus grade down 5.5 points from last year. Strikeout percentage down 5 points. I think you're kind of seeing, the beginning of the end for Luis Castillo, or we'd already seen the beginning of the end. Now you're seeing the middle of the end. But for today, he's 8,500 pitching in Seattle, getting 11% ownership, 11% chance of being optimal. Just another one of those mid-range guys that doesn't really stand out There's plenty of other guys that look like him on the slate. If we zoom out from this game and just look at pitching projections, again, Castillo just kind of in this group where when you factor in volatility, you can really just change, say that you prefer any of these guys and it's fine. So doesn't look, very different than any of them. He's relatively expensive, but not super expensive. He just looks fine at 8,500. He's not the guy that you're like plugging in first. If you think about your lineups like you were hand building, you're not clicking Luis Castillo and saying like, okay, great, I got Luis Castillo, now what? But if you put your lineup together and you just have $8,500 in a pitcher spot left, you kind of just hold your breath, click Luis Castillo, and prepare for disappointment, but know that it's a perfectly reasonable play. Gavin Williams on the other side, I do think looks a bit better, cheaper at 8K. We have him projected a little bit higher as well. Better strikeout stuff, 25% strikeout percentage this year, as I mentioned earlier. That is actually the fourth highest on the slate behind Crochet, Yamamoto, and Webb. So that's up about 1.5 points from last year. Stuff Plus is still about league average. His command this year has sucked. That's been an issue for him. Location Plus is down almost 11 points from last year, well below average this season. So that is something he's had an issue with, but he does have a good strikeout matchup in a great park for pitching. Dangerous matchup too. Seattle is 8th in WRC Plus this year, but they also rank 9th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. Williams getting about 15% ownership, about a 20% chance of being optimal. He looks pretty good. Offensively, I don't think there's anything that stands out here. You know who the good hitters are in this game. If you want low-owned Jose Ramirez, Cal Raleigh, Julio Rodriguez, whatever, go for it. But 12-game slate, grabbing guys out of T-Mobile Park is not generally what I'm going to be prioritizing. If you wanted to try and target specific splits, lefties have done damage against Williams, 206 expected ISO. That does point you towards Cal Raleigh, one of the best home run hitters, best hitters overall in baseball this year. He is $6,000 in Seattle. That's not ideal, but he is the best left-handed power bat that the Mariners have. He's the best power bat in general in this game. Polanco, 4K, will be hitting from the left side. If you look at what Castillo has struggled with this year, 182 expected ISO to lefties, 209 to righties, much lower strikeout percentage against lefties at only 15% compared to 22%. So, Jose Ramirez will have the platoon advantage there. So will Kwan. But, again, no priorities here. It's just, if you want to go to this game, grab the best hitters, grab the guys with the most power upside, because you're not singling them out because they're in a great spot. You're singling them out just because of the raw power upside and the fact that nobody else is playing them. And then finally, we have San Francisco taking on the Dodgers in LA. Logan Webb and Yoshi Yamamoto. Both of these guys are pretty interesting options on this slate. Yamamoto is the priority. He has certainly the better matchup against the Giants. The Giants do get a sizable park upgrade going into Los Angeles, but clearly not as good an offense as the Dodgers are. They rank 18th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They rank 17th in WRC plus. So pretty average offense. Again, not a cakewalk, but when you consider these top three pitchers, Crochet, Yamamoto, and Webb, in terms of strikeout upside, the Giants are clearly the one that, the best matchup out of Giants, Yankees, and Dodgers. So Yamamoto looks good, 22% projected ownership, 17 to 18% chance of being optimal. Second highest projected pitcher for us on the slate behind Crochet. If you can afford 10,600, Yamamoto looks good. For Webb, I'm interested because he's not getting any ownership right now. And I get it. Like, it's a big park downgrade for him. The matchup sucks against the Dodgers. Second, tied with the Yankees in WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year. They don't strike out a lot. Their active roster is 16th in K percentage against right-handed pitching. We have seen a big jump in strikeout percentage for Logan Webb this year. 87 and a third innings pitched. He's gone from a 20.5% K percentage last year to 28.5% this year. His command has been better this year than last year. So just from a talent standpoint, it is interesting to me that right now Webb is only projected for 6% ownership. And I understand it. Like, he's really expensive. He's 10,100 in a spot where he's getting a park downgrade against arguably the best offense in baseball. I get why he's not getting ownership, but just from a talent standpoint, like, he's getting 1/4 to 1/5 the ownership of both Yamamoto and Crochet, and he's not nearly a 3 or 4 or 5 to 1 dog against either of those guys. He projects behind them, but he's probably closer to like, a 2 to 1 dog or something like that. So if you do have salary and you need a low-owned pitcher, Webb makes sense. If you already have a low-owned team, just click Yamamoto or Crochet. They certainly project better. But like the Orioles, for example, would be a team that I would probably find it really interesting to maybe pair them with Logan Webb because they're cheap. I'm going to have the money to get good bats and good pitching around them. That's one reason they are so popular. But that also means that a large percentage of your Orioles lineups that your opponents have are going to be some combination of Orioles stack plus Yamamoto, or Orioles stack plus Crochet, or maybe Orioles stack plus Crochet plus Yamamoto, and just like the Rockies or something. So that is a spot where like one option you have is to just build differently and have like the Orioles in this example plus 3 really good one-offs like Acuna, Judge gets negative correlation against Crochet teams, and Ohtani or something. You could go that route, and then you're paying down for pitching and you have a different build. But the other thing you can do is go with the similar build that a lot of people are going to have, but then just say, okay, well, if Logan Webb beats Yamamoto or Logan Webb beats Crochet, then I have a leg up on those teams. And you're not sacrificing upside that way. You're just sacrificing medium projection. So from an ownership standpoint, I find Webb interesting, but certainly the lowest projected of those 3 10K plus guys. Also projects lower than Freddie Peralta, who's $600 less expensive. Offensively, Giants park upgrade is nice. Matchup against Yamamoto is not. They're not getting any ownership. Another group that is 3-4% chance of being optimal. If you want to play the park upgrade at pretty cheap price tags, fine. But it is a weaker lineup than usual too. No Matt Chapman. He's out for the foreseeable future. So that doesn't help. Like you have Dominic Smith batting cleanup for this team, Casey Schmidt batting 6th. That is not the scariest lineup or a lineup that I really am in a hurry to get to against a pitcher in Yamamoto that has a 28% strikeout, 28+% strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate, 130 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties. Not really very interested in the Giants here. On the other side, the Dodgers, very tough matchup also against Webb, but clearly the more talented of the 2 offenses. The only guy getting ownership here, though, is Ohtani. 10% chance of being optimal, 10% ownership. Goes without saying, it's Shohei Ohtani. Other than that, though, you have like 3% or less ownership to the rest of the Dodgers, 3 to 5% chance of being optimal. So another team very similar to a lot of others where they're not getting any ownership. They're slightly on their own, but they are still a low probability team. But certainly I would say, and you are paying for it, but much more upside, raw upside, obviously, for the Dodgers than a team like the Giants, if you want to go there. So to quickly recap and then get out of here so I can go make lineups, starting with the pitchers, top pitching options on the slate. In terms of projection, Crochet, Yamamoto, and Peralta. In terms of optimal percentage, Crochet, Gavin Williams, Elder, Yamamoto are the top ones here. Do keep an eye on the weather for Bryce Elder. That matters a lot in Atlanta. Offensively, catchers, top 3 in terms of optimal percentage. Adley Rutschman, Salvador Perez, Logan O'Hoppe, and Yainer Diaz are tied. Keep an eye on the weather in Baltimore as well. First base at the top. If my computer loads, Nolan Schanuel in Baltimore, Christian Walker in Houston, Luis Arraez, Vinny Pasquantino, Matt Olson, all basically the same. I do really like the home run spot here for Olson against German Marquez. Struggles with left-handed power and doesn't miss a lot of bats. We do have weather concerns there again. Second base, Jonathan India, Jackson Holliday. It was Bryce Turang, but I'm guessing that dropped since he's hitting 7th now. So I'll go Jake Cronenworth ahead of Turang. But India and Holiday both looking like solid value options here. 4,100 on Jackson Holiday, I really like a lot. He is getting a massive amount of ownership, though. At third base, Michael Garcia, Royce Lewis, Manny Machado, Austin Riley. I really like Royce Lewis, only getting 8% ownership at 2,700 with the platoon advantage. That looks really appealing to me. Shortstop, we have Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr., as usual, Zach Neto at the top if you need to save some money. So in terms of optimal percentage, it is paying up a lot at shortstop. But if you do need to save money, Xander Bogaerts looks like he's going under-owned and looks pretty interesting. Carlos Correa is very cheap as well. And finally, wrapping things up in the outfield, Byron Buxton, Fernando Tatis, Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna, Mike Trout. I assume the main reason you guys are watching my show is because you needed me to tell you that those guys are all good. But those are the highest optimal percentage guys in the outfield. Looks pretty likely like we'll be able to save some money either at SP2 or at some of the infield positions and pay up for what we want in the outfield. Top stacks here, rounding it out overall. That is not right. Kansas City, Baltimore, Minnesota, San Diego, Angels, top 5 in all stacked types. Kansas City, Angels, San Diego, Minnesota, Cincinnati, in 5-mans, but I will say that it's very flat. Like Kansas City's at the top. And then basically all of like San Diego, Minnesota, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Baltimore, Atlanta are very, very similar in terms of 5-mans. So that's all I have for you on this one. Thanks again for checking out the show. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. For a home run pick, I will go Matt Olson against Erman Marquez. Almost forgot that one, but I do really like that. Thanks again for checking out the show. Have a good weekend. Good luck on your lineups. See you back here again next week.